There's a specific point in a grief that has no timeline, not the acute moment, not the day it happened, but later, weeks in, when the world has decided you should be moving on and you haven't, and you're sitting in a room that looks completely normal with people around you who love you, and something inside you is just stuck. That's when it happens. Not a decision, exactly. More like a recognition. The keys come off the hook before the thought fully forms. They check the weather, not because they're worried about rain, but because checking the weather is the first step in a sequence the body already knows. And then they're already in the garage, already moving. Before they've consciously decided anything at all, the destination doesn't matter. The direction barely matters. What matters is this. Somewhere between the hook and the helmet, the brain has already begun doing something it couldn't do inside. And that process, that specific psychological process, is what this video is actually about. The word people reach for when they see a rider leave during a hard time is escape. It feels accurate from the outside. Someone is here, then they're not. Something difficult is present, then they're absent from it. The logic of escape seems to fit, but escape and restoration are not the same thing psychologically, and that distinction matters both for the rider who can't quite articulate why they do this, and for the people around them who are trying to understand it. Escape is moving away from something. Its defining feature is avoidance. The goal is to not engage with a thing. Restoration is something different. It's the deliberate or instinctual creation of conditions that allow the mind to do a particular kind of work it can't do in the environment it's currently in. The psychologist Stephen Kaplan spent decades studying what he called restorative environments, places or situations that allow the mind to recover a specific cognitive capacity he called directed attention. Directed attention is the kind of focus you use to solve problems, manage a conversation, push through a difficult task. It's what you're using right now to follow this argument. And it has a limited capacity. It fatigues. When it's depleted, when someone has been in a hard situation long enough, thinking hard enough, managing emotions consciously enough, directed attention doesn't just slow down. It becomes counterproductive. The mind spins. It returns to the same thoughts. It mistakes activity for progress. What Kaplan found is that certain environments, particularly those involving natural movement and mild sensory engagement, allow directed attention to genuinely rest, while a different kind of attention takes over, what he called involuntary attention. This is the brain's softer, receptive mode. It doesn't solve. It processes. It integrates. Motorcycle riding, for many people, is exactly this kind of environment. This isn't running from the problem. This is creating the conditions the brain needs to actually do something with it. Riding a motorcycle requires a specific quality of attention. Not deep analytical thought, but not passive either. The body is managing balance, throttle, road surface, spatial awareness, wind, sound. There's an ongoing low-level sensory demand that occupies just enough cognitive bandwidth to do something very specific. Quiet what neuroscientists call the default mode network. The default mode network is the brain's self-referential system, the network that activates when you're not focused on a task. It's responsible for mind-wandering, self-reflection, and, when something is unresolved, rumination. It's the part of the brain that replays the difficult conversation at 2 a.m. That circles the problem without moving through it. When the sensory demands of riding suppress default mode activity, something shifts. The constant return to the same thought, the loop, becomes quieter. Not because the problem has been solved, but because the brain is now in a different processing state. What riders tend to notice after a long ride is not that they have answers. It's that they have clarity. And those two things are not the same. Answers are outcomes. Clarity is a different quality of perception, a sense that you can now see the shape of something you couldn't see before. That distinction, clarity without answers, is actually a precise description of what default mode suppression, followed by involuntary attention processing, can produce. There's a well-established body of research on the relationship between physical movement and emotional processing. The short version is this. The two are not separate systems operating in parallel. They're deeply integrated. Physical movement, particularly rhythmic, whole-body movement through space. appears to accelerate the processing of emotional material in ways that stillness cannot replicate. One way to understand this is through the concept of somatic processing. Emotional experience isn't only cognitive. It's held in the body in tension, in breath, in the nervous system's activation state. When someone is in the middle of something unresolved, their body is carrying that as much as their mind is. Sitting still with a difficult emotion keeps the body in the same physiological state the emotion produced. Moving through space, especially with the physical engagement that writing demands, begins to shift that state. The body moving through space is not separate from the mind working through something. In many ways, it is the mind working through something. This is why writers often notice that what felt completely unresolvable before a long ride feels different after one. Not necessarily resolved, but different in weight, in texture, in the way it sits. The emotional charge hasn't disappeared, but its intensity has shifted. The body has moved through enough physical experience that the nervous system has had a chance to process some of what the mind kept returning to. The ride itself becomes part of how the emotion gets metabolized, not avoided. This next mechanism is subtler, but possibly the most important. When someone is in the middle of something genuinely difficult, grief, an unresolved decision, a situation that seems to have no clear shape, one of the most disorienting features is its formlessness. There's no clear beginning, no momentum, no discernible progress, no sense of moving toward anything. The mind, which needs structure to function well, is trying to process something that provides none. A ride has structure. It has a beginning, the moment of departure, the first turn. It has momentum, a continuous, tangible sense of movement through space. It has turns and decisions, each one small and manageable. It has a destination, even a vague one. And it has an end. For a brain that is struggling with a situation that feels endless and shapeless, this imposed structure has a genuine psychological effect. Human cognition is deeply organized around narrative and sequence. We process experience more effectively when it has a perceivable arc. Movement through physical space provides exactly that arc, independent of the emotional content the person is carrying. The ride doesn't resolve what's formless, but it gives the brain a container, a temporary structure, within which the formless thing can be held while the mind works on it. By the time the ride ends, the brain has had the experience of moving through something with a shape. For someone who doesn't write a partner, a family member, a friend, the moment a writer reaches for the keys during a hard time can read as withdrawal, as a choice to be somewhere other than here, as unavailability. What they see is someone leaving. What's actually happening is someone creating the conditions to come back more capable than they left. It only looks like abandonment if you don't understand what the brain is doing during that time. Because what's happening during that ride is not the suspension of engagement with the difficult thing. It's the beginning of a cognitive and physiological process that makes deeper engagement possible afterward. The restoration phase isn't the end of the process, it enables the continuation of it. This doesn't make the departure easy for the people left behind. That part is real and worth acknowledging. But there's a meaningful difference between a partner who understands that the ride is how their person processes, and one who experiences it only as disappearance. The mechanism, once understood, doesn't remove the difficulty, but it does change what the difficulty means. And that changes how people can talk about it. Every person has some version of this. Some environment or activity that creates the conditions for the brain to do work it can't do in ordinary circumstances. For some people, that's running the same rhythmic movement, the same default mode suppression, the same somatic processing. For others, it's fishing or driving alone or a long walk with no particular destination. For some people, it's the motorcycle. The vehicle changes. The psychology is the same. What varies is only how well the person can explain it and how well the people around them can recognize it for what it is. Not avoidance, not flight, but the particular and necessary act of creating space inside themselves for something too large to be processed any other way. The ones who can't explain why they have to ride aren't being evasive. They just know, at some level below language, that the ride is part of how they come back.